Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week we are talking all about how to value yourself. Now, many of our clients and supporters really struggle with low self-worth. Outwardly, they may appear successful and happy, but deep down they believe they are not enough. They believe they have to earn value in order to be good enough, to be accepted and appreciated by other people. Well, in this teaching, we'll be explaining why you may be undervaluing yourself right now and the steps you need to take to awaken to your amazing self-worth and potential. Okay, David, so why is it that we just don't value ourselves enough?
I think this is a really important subject, and surprisingly, it's a subject I cover a lot with my clients. So first of all, if this applies to you, I'd want you to think about, and we can explore in this video, what do you mean by value? What is value? And how do you define your value? Now, with my clients, what I find, this is very closely connected with the inner child work. Because when we're growing up as a child, for most of us, we're brought up in an environment when the parental teachings that we get, the techniques our parents used, are based on love and value. So basically, if you're a good girl or a good boy, you may get value and love, and mommy and daddy are very pleased with you, and they give you positive strokes. But if you don't do something if you do something they don't like, such as even messing up your bedroom or not doing your homework or not going to bed on time, then they withdraw that love and value. So for that part of the mind that we label the inner child, it sees value as a commodity, as something that is given to you or taken away from you. And if you don't examine it by thinking about it and meditating on it, this idea of value being a commodity, as you said in the introduction, that you have to earn or is given to you or can be taken away from you, this makes you very needy and very subservient to the value of worth.
So I understand, David, that when we were younger, when we were a young child and we're being parented, that we had to look externally for reassurance, for love, for guidance, for a pat on the back to say, yes, you're doing okay, you're doing great. But why is it that now we're adults, we're supposedly much more mature? Why is it that our part of our mind that you're calling the inner child is still working on these old childlike systems?
Well, this is why this inner child work is so vitally important to you, because remember, when we talk about the inner child, we're talking about a part of your mind, but a very important part of your mind that's kind of frozen, like a kind of the middle of a nut, like a kernel, frozen tight. And it's still frozen on these old values of looking externally for their approval, for their value, for their worth. So this, if you're a person, say, for instance, who is people-pleasing, what you're doing is you're always looking at what others think about you, how others interpret you, how others treat you. You're always putting your power into other people's hands. And this comes from childhood when you were codependent. All children are codependent. For your food, for your clothing, for the roof over your head, you are codependent. But it's almost like that part of the mind has become frozen. And as I say on many videos, one of the characteristics of your inner child is it loves familiarity. So it's kind of stuck on the carousel of despair or the hamster's wheel, that it's looking externally to you for this emotional reassurance. You may use words like emotional safety or emotional protection, but it's always looking outside of yourself. It's changing the flow of qi, and this is why it becomes a Taoist subject as well. You're misinterpreting the flow of qi. And instead of being self-sufficient and self-reliant, you're becoming needy and almost like a doormat because you're constantly worrying about what other people think. And this could be partners, parents, friends, bosses, people at work, other people. Sometimes I call it the faceless jury, just anybody. And when I say what other people think of you is none of your business, if that causes you a bit of a jolt, let me give it to you again. What other people think of you is none of your business. Now, if you kind of go, well, that doesn't make sense, then this might be for you. Because I'll tell you why. If I came to 10 of your closest friends and members of your family and asked them about you, I would get 10 different answers, all relating about you. Which one of those are true? Which one of those is the real you? Which one of those gives you value and gives you worth? And you see the problem? When you put that power externally to you, you are constantly in this needy mode, this victim mode that I call it.
Okay, so there's so many things I want to ask you about what you just said there. I want to talk about the chi energy flow thing, but we'll just park that for a minute. If a lot of people would say, well, that person over there, they're very successful, they're really outgoing, they're really getting on with their life. Those sort of people can also struggle with this issue of seeking external validation because they don't believe that they believe they're not good enough. It's not just like the obvious people who are very in on themselves, very introverted, very talking negatively about themselves. This can affect anyone.
This can affect anyone because what they've done in their mind, they've made a separation. So they made a separation in, say, for instance, business, where they are very self-motivated, very self-sufficient, very self-controlling. But in their personal life, in their emotional being, they are still looking for this validation. If you think of the word validation, I often think that's an interesting word, the giving of value. They're looking at someone else to give them value. And so even though they may be successful, and many of my clients are highly successful in their business life, but they don't see that financial success as real value. They're looking somewhere else. And it's very subtle, you see. They're looking for this inconceivable commodity of value that someone is going to give them because they probably didn't have it that they perceive as a child.
Because I was wondering, why is it that someone may be successful and not doubting their own value or capability, say, in their career or business, but that same person would be very doubting of their worth and value in, say, their personal relationships? Why can't that person kind of superimpose the same mindset they have for the career on their personal life?
I find this very interesting as well, Alex. And I think this is why the analogy or the metaphor of the inner child really works well. Because in their business life, in their financial life, in their career, it may not be that the inner child is involved in that. What they're doing is technical or very kind of high-powered, and the part of the mind that we're calling the inner child kind of steps away from that. But when they get in touch with what people think about them and what people consider in their love life, in their relationships, in their marriages, in their friendships, in their family life, now the inner child part of the mind is very much connected in that. And it is also, this is why this metaphor of the inner child really works well, because it allows you to focus on that part of the mind. And if the things I've talked about, particularly the one I said about what other people think of you, if that particularly kind of pushes back, then you know that there's a part of the mind that can't accept that. Because if I said that to a business person about business, they would say, I'm not worried at all. Yeah. I'm more worried about making profit or doing the deal or being successful.
But David, what if someone says, like, surely what my boss thinks of me, or what my wife thinks of me, or my husband thinks of me, or my partner thinks of me, is important to me? Because if they don't think I'm good enough, then that completely undermines who I am and our relationship, whether it's a business relationship or a personal relationship.
But that's based on what you just said. That's based on the core understanding that your value and worth is based on what your wife or your mother or your father thinks about you. How can that be true?
Yeah.
Because they could be going through episodes in their life where their sense of value, their sense of giving out worth might be affected. So if you're waiting for them to give you value, you're falling into the trap that believing the value is a commodity, where I believe spiritually that value is intrinsic to you, is who you are. I've said on many videos, think about it. No one ever holds a baby up in the delivery room. The midwife doesn't hold the baby up to the light and says, please, can somebody give this baby some value, some worth? Nobody ever does that, because we all accept and we all know that every human being has value and worth. Now, if you agree with me, I hope you do, that a newborn baby has value and worth, and you now believe you have no value and worth, where did you lose that? How did you lose that? Did somebody take it away from you? Is it something that somebody can do? You see how important, as I said to you at the very beginning of this teaching, what is your definition of value and worth? And where do you believe it comes from? Do you believe you had no value and worth as a child, and suddenly your parents, like guardian angels, suddenly produced some value and worth and gave it to you? And they said, well, this is for your safekeeping, but we can take it away anytime we want to. That can't be true.
But as a child, it can seem like that.
As a child, it's almost indoctrinated.
Exactly.
That
if we get criticised as a child overtly, or if we get the cold shoulder from a teacher or a parent, or we believe that someone is annoyed with us, it can seem like the end of the world to a child.
Because that's your perception. Yeah. That's a child's perception that's been given to them. The value is something that they have to earn. It's almost like, I'm back to my idea. I always have this idea when I'm doing these teachings, as that cartoon of the donkey and the carrot just dangling in front of it. And you're always trying to grasp, but it's just out of your reach. And that's why our parents tell us this, because they believe it will inspire us, it will make us do better, that we want to please them. And if they keep on raising the bar of expectations, we will want to keep on jumping over the bar of expectations. And we never sit down and say, well, do we accept that bar of expectations as our bar? Do we want to jump to other people's bar? And that's what makes you needy and in need of their strokes and their approval, because you're always looking for them to give you that approval. But what you're doing actually, spiritually, is you're handing the power to them. You're taking the power away from yourself and handing it to other people. And you're basically saying, I'm only worthy, I only have value if you tell me that I have value. And then here comes the interesting little twist. Even if they told you, oh my God, you're so valuable, you are the most important person in my life, oh, my life revolves around you, it's not going to be enough. No. Then you'll look for somebody else. This is the carrot again, you see. Then you'll say, well, I've got them, but they don't think I'm valuable, or they don't think I'm valuable. Then you're constantly on this merry-go-round that we call the carousel of despair. If you prefer, it's like a hamster's wheel. You're going faster and faster and faster, and you never obtain it, because the truth is the only value can come from you to you. You already have value. And when we talk in our videos about the 3 lies, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I have no value. Can you see the problem of not accepting yourself, of looking externally for acceptance? And this is what creates this maze that we try and do these videos on. I know it can be paradoxical and it can be very confusing, because that's the way your mind works. You have set up this confusing paradox that keeps you trapped. And we're trying our best to release those doors so you can step out and to understand that the only value for you is what you place on yourself. I believe you're awesome. I say it on all of the videos. But do you really believe that? When I look at you and now say, you are awesome. There is no one in the universe like you. You are totally unique. Totally unique. What do you think about that? Now, if you agree with me, then seeking value from someone else is meaningless. So if you don't agree with me, then where do you believe you get value from? What do you believe the value is? You see, and that's the very important question. That's why I opened with this teaching with, what is your definition of value and where does it come from? And how can somebody else be in a position? I did this with a client just last week where she was saying, no, value does come from other people. And I was saying, well, why have they got extra value that they can give you value? What makes them superior and inferior? And you see, immediately you've created the balance where somebody is superior and you are inferior. And you've created that, no one else.
But it can get confusing though, because for example, if we're in a job, obviously our boss or our line manager is superior to us in terms of judging our work performance and everything. And I think this is where people get confused. When we talk about value, we're not talking necessarily about value of, are you technically good at your job, or in a relationship, how good are you at communicating with your partner? They are their life skills or their work skills. And people are it is perfectly reasonable for people to make a judgment or to give you feedback or criticism even on, your skills. But we're talking about the actual intrinsic core value of who you are as an individual. And I think a lot of the time we allow the inner child to collect all this kind of negative feedback, maybe judgments of people, and say, oh, you're not good at this, you're not good at that, you could be better, you failed that, you did that wrong. And then almost build that jigsaw up to us equaling to be not good enough as a person.
That's right, Alex. And so there's a confusion here. You're quite right. If you look at something like soccer players or, football players, we would put a value on that person's worth 20 million, that person's only worth 1 million. But we're not talking about them as human beings, as spiritual beings. We're talking about their skill set. So, and what we have to be careful of is we don't get that confused. So the value that your boss puts on you at your job worth is not valuing you as a person, as who you are intrinsically, who you are in this unique person that you are. They are just making a judgment on your skill set, not on you. But the inner child, as you quite rightly says, makes it all about me. It's a judgment on me, not on my ability. So your ability is something that you can improve on, you can change, you can get better, or perhaps you're in the wrong role or in the wrong career, but when say a footballer who's worth 20 million gets old and retires, does that mean his value as a person is now diminished? His value as a footballer is diminished. He is no longer worth in football terms 20 million, but his value as a human being is still a father, is still a husband, is still a member of society, he still has a lot to offer, he can still go on and have another career. Can you see the difference?
But that same footballer, if their whole vision of who they were as an individual was predicated on them being a successful footballer and them having a certain monetary value, getting a certain level of scores or results or certain level of adoration from fans or sports pundits, then as soon as they become worth less monetary value or they don't get that adoration back, then their perception is that they are worth less as a human being.
That's right.
Even though that's not the reality.
That's right. And now, as currently, and I've been doing some work with young footballers just coming up through. And when, as you probably know, my first career was a professional footballer. And when people are constantly telling you how wonderful you are and how fantastic you are, and people are squabbling over your transfer fees and putting up the value, and you see this with celebrities and film stars, that if people are constantly telling you, you get this line confused with the value that you have as a footballer or a film star or a TV personality. You get that confused with your personal intrinsic value. And you see how it gets crossed over, and you see how many of these highly successful people then go on and have emotional difficulties later on in life.
But would you say part of the problem of that equation is that their inner child, that part of our mind that we all have, almost feasts, gorges on the praise and the adoration? But the problem with that is, as soon as the praise and adoration is taken away, it's like you fall off a cliff.
Well, there's two problems with that, though. You're absolutely right. But when it's gorging on adoration, it's never enough.
Right. Okay.
You see, this is the problem with the inner child. As I gave you the example, if your partner fell to their knees and kissed your feet and says, "Oh my God, you're so wonderful, you're so fantastic." If your parent suddenly says, "Oh, I'm so sorry for my poor parenting techniques. I can't believe what we did. We are now your servant. We are at your beck and call." What actually changes? So for the inner child part of your mind, this is why the inner child work is so important. Even if you're gorging, I like what you worked on this, you're gorging on this adoration, this constant approval. "Oh my God, you're such a great footballer. Oh, your last film was so good. Oh, your last TV appearance was so wonderful." It's never enough. It's always wanting more. And then, as you say, at the end of that phase in your life, when you're no longer old enough to be a successful footballer, or you're not on the top show, or you're not getting or the papers have a go at you, you see it all the time when the papers then criticize you. Now you go from the highest and you drop down to the lowest. Because you're looking externally again. You're always looking externally for what you can only create internally.
And you could impose that same formula on relationships. So at the start of a relationship where your new partner is paying you lots and lots of attention, saying lots of positive things to you, doing lots of things for you, we can soak up the attention and the adoration and feel like we're floating on cloud nine. But if our inner child is wholly dependent on that, to know that we are lovable as a partner, to know that we are good enough as a partner, to know that we are special, and then all of a sudden that level of attention falls away, then it's like something's missing. Then it's like a piece of us is missing. Then it's like we failed.
But using that example, which is equally as good an example, when you're in that early stage, the inner child then is still looking for, should he have done that? Should she have done that? Is that right? Or, it's still never satisfied.
Because
it can never be satisfied, Alex. That's the key. It's always looking back to my analogy of the carrot. The donkey's always grasping at the carrot. So even when at the beginning of the relationship, you are getting the attention from your partner, a new partner, and it's like, it's wonderful. But there's still this little doubt on, they haven't answered. They took a long time to answer my text, or they didn't. They've only sent me 2 texts today, or 3 texts, or they wasn't quick on answering. I didn't like the word. There's still that doubt because you're always looking externally.
I guess at the root of this constant looking externally for reassurance and value is that seed of self-doubt.
Yes.
Because if we didn't have that core belief that we weren't good enough, that we weren't lovable, then we wouldn't have anything motivating or driving that constant need for reassurance.
And that's what I always work with my clients, and I'll use words like self-doubt or lack of self-confidence. Well, remember, confidence is a feeling, so you're creating the feeling. So I always am mystified, and I say, well, what part of you is doubting what part of you? Because in that statement, and if you use these type of statements, I have self-doubt, just after this video, sit down and think, what does that actually mean? Because I've been doing this job for 45 years, and I've got to be truthful. I don't know what that statement means, because you're saying, I am doubting myself. So is it your mind doubting what your body, your big toe, your nose? Is it your mind doubting your own mind? It doesn't, it gets more, the more I think about it, the more confusing that it gets. Self-doubt, low self-esteem. What is it that you're doubting? Because if you already think you have no esteem, how can you doubt you've got esteem? It's like
it's very perverse and confusing.
It's very confusing. And yet my clients want to hold on to this it's like a terrier holding onto a bone. They won't let go of it. And even when I say, could you explain that to me? I don't understand what that means. Could you, first of all, explain to me which part is the superior part? Because that's self-doubt. In yourself, you've created a superior part and an inferior part. So can we speak to the superior part? What puts them into the position of being superior, that they can doubt the inferior part of you? And then which part of you is the inferior part of you? And how can they doubt that? And who's in control here? And you can see how confusing it gets. And these are the wonderful things I get through when I'm working with a session where the client, because as you said, and you wanted to go back to, this strongly affects your chi energy. And for a Taoist, this is the most important part. When you create this confusion, this misdirection of attention, you're affecting your chi energy, and that's affecting your health and well-being.
And how so? How does that work? I mean, what's the difference between the chi energy flowing the wrong way when we're looking externally, and then how should it be flowing? What's the right way?
Well, I believe, and I always say to you guys, and I say to you, that we are part of nature, we are part of the universe, we are part of that energy flow, and we cannot be superior or inferior. We are part of a oneness. So once you go, well, I need value from somebody else, now you've created a dichotomy, you've created an imbalance. You're looking for other people to give you something. In the case of validation, it's a chi energy. You're looking for them to give you your chi energy where you're already connected to your chi energy. And that can't happen. So chi energy is a natural, normal, spiritual resource that you're part of already. And you're basically saying to me, no, I'm not, David. No, I'm not. They are, but I'm not. And I need them to connect. As normally when I'm doing a kind of a public talk, I normally say, it's like you've got an electric wire and you're saying, well, I'm walking around looking for a socket to push in the wire to make me feel alive. When you push it into yourself, you are the source. You are the energy source. There is no one greater or superior to you or inferior to you. And this is the teaching of oneness. So somebody may be a better footballer than you or a better artist than you, but that does not make them superior to you. That just means they have a skill. I'm pretty sure that you would have a skill that they haven't got. You may be a great mother, a great wife, a great provider. You may be very good at math, at English, at writing, at art, that they're not. And instead of focusing on what you're good at, which I'm trying to encourage you to do, is to be the best that you can be, not the best in the world. Because when you're trying to be the best in the world, all you're doing is you're on the merry-go-round of comparing, criticizing, and being judgmental, that we call CCJ. Being the best that you can be means focusing on your skill set, on what you're good at, and taking responsibility and being self-sufficient for that. And when I'm working with my clients, that's what we focus on, is to stopping this familiar kind of almost like an addiction, to be honest, of constantly looking outside. It's that powerful. It is like an addiction.
But David, what about, to use your analogy, what if someone says to you, okay, you say, I should be plugging back into myself, self-referring, rather than trying to plug into external situations or external people to give me the kind of chi energy of reassurance, of love, of validation. But David, when I plug it back into myself, when I self-refer, there's nothing there, or it just doesn't seem as powerful or as reassuring as when I plug into other people.
So if that was you telling me that as a client, and I was saying to you, what could you please now, because I do not understand what you just said. I truly do not understand what you just said. I'm not being... If you were role-playing a client, I would say to you, I truly do not understand what you just said to me, Alex. Could you now please explain to me why that person has more power than you?
I guess it's because in my mind's eye, I have placed that individual on a pedestal above me as being a better judge of who I am, or my skills, or my abilities, or my worth. And I can see that's wrong when we look at it like that.
Exactly. So I would ask you then, how and why have you done that? That's your choice. You see, I say in many videos, and these are very powerful sayings, not making a choice is making a choice. You cannot go through life without making choice. And that little role play that Alex has just done has showed me that that person has made a choice to put that other person on a pedestal. Now, you can do that. Please do that. I'm only asking you, why have you chosen to do that?
I think it's actually, thinking about it, I think it's more to do with the fact that, so the other person may be in a more informed or educated or skilled position to make a judgment on my skills on something. So if it was, but they're not in a better position to make a judgment about, to know who I am as a person, or to make a judgment about who I am in terms of my intrinsic value.
Exactly.
But then this is where I would fall down on the trap of thinking, if all I am is about how good I am at my job, or if all I am is about how good I am in my relationship, or if all I am is about how big my house is, or if all I am is about how good I look, then that's a kind of, it's like flimsy ground to place your self-worth on.
But what I would want you to say is that all you are?
Well, this is, because this is not who all we are, but the problem is, I think our society and the media encourage us to place an overt, an inauthentic amount of value on those things.
And that's why I do these videos. Yeah. This is why I do these videos, so you can consider, is that all you are? Is that all your value? And here's the tester I always give you. If you're going, I'm more on Alex's side. I'm more on Alex's side here, David. I think you're on rocky ground. Let me ask you the question I ask you on all the videos. Would you say to your physical child, all you are, my son, my daughter, all you are is what your teacher says? And if your teacher tells you you're not good, then I'm sorry, you're not good. Of course you wouldn't. It'd be the last thing you'd say. It'd be the last thing you'd say. Yet you're saying it to yourself. And there's where we do the Wu Wei. That's out of balance. You're on the pendulum. You're using one set of values for your physical child and a different set for yourself. And so you have to be clear, and that should be exactly the same. The same as you would say to your physical child is exactly the same that you would say to your inner child. And that's why I think the teaching of the inner child can be very powerful. As I've said on many videos, I would like you to think of yourself as the spiritual parent. Speaking to that part of your mind is like your spiritual child. And the way you would coach and parent and reparent your physical child is exactly the same way as you would parent your spiritual child. Yeah. So if your spiritual child is saying, well, I value them above me, what would you say? If your physical child comes to you and says, Mummy, my teacher says, I'm really not very good at this. That means I'm not very good, doesn't it?
Mm. Well, you wouldn't agree with the child.
Exactly.
You would say, darling, that your teacher is only there to educate you in a certain way. They don't know everything. Let's have a look at what the issue is, what the skill is we're talking about here. You're a wonderful person. Look at all the great things you've done. You'd be very reassuring. You'd ask them to step back, look at the bigger picture. You'd hold their hand. you would support them. You wouldn't agree with them, which is what we normally do.
And I would hope you would give them a hug.
Yeah.
And you would say, I love you. You and I are together. It doesn't matter what your teacher says about you. Teachers aren't always right, you know. And if we stick together, we will work through any of the ups and downs and the adversity and the tribulations that we will meet, because we have a strong bond together. You would not say, well, your teacher's a very educated woman, you know, so she could be right. There could be something wrong with you. I'm on her side.
But that's what we do.
That's exactly what we do.
And so the teacher could be our boss at work, it could be a critical friend, it could be our partner, it could be a family member. That
could be a magazine.
It could be a magazine.
A TV interview, a newspaper story, could be anything where I call the faceless Julia.
So what you're saying is, rather than going down the route of agreeing with the inner child's narrative, which is self-doubting, wanting to improve, to be better, just to get the stroke, to get the strokes externally, you have to, every time you have that, I guess, temptation to go down that route, just to get that extra stroke, just to seek that extra bit of validation, you have to self-refer, you have to sit with yourself and talk quietly within yourself to that inner child part of your mind.
So on a Taoist teaching, that's when you ground yourself and you find your center and you breathe down deep into your spiritual knowledge, and you say, and you give yourself that hug, and you say, we are one. We can't be separate. There is no you and me. There is no us. There's who we are. There's no separation. There is a oneness. And that oneness is absolutely best displayed when we're going through adversity. We do not separate, no matter how stormy the seas are, no matter how strong the criticism, no matter how badly those other people compare us or judge us. You know, all that does? Builds our inner strength, builds our self-sufficiency, builds our inner knowledge of who we really are. And we will come through any stormy seas together as one, and nothing can separate us, because we have value and worth. We are part of something much bigger. We are part of nature and the universe, and we are one.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Well, there's lots more teachings we have to help you on this topic. We've done a whole raft of inner child reparenting teachings that I will share with you in the show notes, as well as teachings on self-love and self-validation. And so please do check them out. If you enjoyed this teaching, please do let us know and share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works every week with clients all over the world via video call. And if you're interested in learning more about David's sessions and how he could help you with some of the topics we've talked about today, I will also put a link to David's sessions in the show notes as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.